Hello, and welcome to the Thinking Elixir podcast, where we cover the news of the community and learn from each other. My name is Mark Erickson.
And I'm David Bernheisel.
Let's jump into the news. The big news, of course, is that Phoenix version 1.8.0 was finally released officially. And just as a reminder, the week before, LiveView 1.1 was released with some also amazing goodies. You were talking last week, David, about how you tried out the LiveView 1.1 and it had some dependency that required Phoenix 1.8.
Yeah, the what was it? The macro components or something like that for the JS located, co-located stuff. So yeah, and in true podcast fashion, we talked about it, and then like later that day, Phoenix 1.8 released. So that's how it goes, I guess. But It's all ready now.
Yep. So both of them are out there, so you can get that upgrade. We want to talk about some of the cool stuff that is in this Phoenix 1.8 release. One of the interesting ones, it's the new AGENTS.md. That's a markdown file. So when you generate a new Phoenix app, this document gets created in the root of the project, and that is designed specifically to be read by LLMs or your coding tools so that it has a better understanding of how to work with Elixir and Phoenix. A lot of that knowledge and insight came from Chris's work on the phx.new website, which goes through these rapid turns to just kind of like guardrails off, go, and build me an app. So a lot of the stuff he learned there about the common mistakes that the LLMs would do, refine all that, put all that into this. And so now everyone gets to benefit from that. So that's awesome. I haven't tried it yet, but I'm looking forward to that one. You know, all you got to do, like say you've got your existing app, right? You just download the new Phoenix, create a new app, and then you can grab that agents.md file out and use it in your current app. But there's a whole bunch more in this release. Some of the stuff that we're going to be probably talking about for a while.
Like dark mode. We're going to be talking about that forever.
But yes, dark mode. Go for it.
So yeah, now newly generated Phoenix projects will get a dark mode generated alongside of it. So it's not groundbreaking, of course not. It's just dark mode, but it is pretty cool to see how they would generate a project with that from the get-go. So you can have support of that. If you're keeping all of that stuff around, you'll have dark mode at the start, which is great. And even better, I think. Yeah, it's like typically this is really about themes. And by themes of the website, it's like way, way, way down the priority list of things that you ought to be worrying about. but the typical themes of the web is like light or dark, and that's pretty much it, right? But it is possible that you could have more themes. So you've seen it on clever websites every once in a while. You got some purple, theme, light theme, dark theme, of course, and or elite theme where everything is dark and green, things like that, right? So if that makes you happy, then hey, there you go. It's themes and dark mode is now a part of the generated Phoenix projects. Dark mode is really the only addition here, but it just leaves room for themes, which is the point there.
But what I think is cool about that is if you're new to some of this stuff, this shows you how to do that, right? So you can see, how do I do the styling so I can get light and dark on my page without, that's cool.
It's tough to do that just right, because you go to another page and it might flash white or something, right? Or something along those lines, or remembering which theme somebody has selected, or reacting to whatever the system's settings are. Sometimes it'll prefer dark mode when it's nighttime for them.
Right. Yeah.
So that's all kind of done out of the box for you, which is great. We won't stay on dark mode forever, though. The other good thing that's coming up is streamlined generators, which, of course, includes dark mode stuff, and layouts. Layouts, to me, has been hard to grasp, hard to get right, on the first pass of just understanding what was created for me. In olden days of Phoenix, you would just have a root layout, and it was just called layout. And then LiveView came out and made things different. So they introduced the concept of a root layout and then an app layout, which when I'm thinking about them, like, what's the difference? Why do I have two different layouts here? We understood that to mean there's a dead render and then a LiveView render, and they have to be separate. And that's why we have two different layouts of that. One's LiveView aware, basically, right? And so we operated in that regard for a while, and now they're contracting that pattern back down, thankfully, to where you generally only have to worry about one layout. And by that, I mean, like, that root layout is what we're talking about here. And so instead, Now in your controllers or in your live views, when you're writing your templates there, probably the very first line in that template is going to be layouts dot something, right? Layouts dot admin, layouts dot normal, or whatever layout that you're looking for. And so that's going to call that layout component code, which since live view, all layouts are just components at this point. And so that's just going to render that component like normal, like any other Phoenix component at this point. And all of your typical stuff will just be inside of that component as a big giant inner slot at that point, right? So it's standardized. It's treated like any other component at this point. Maybe you got to repeat yourself a little bit more with every live view, and now having to include that layout in there. And again, this is just for newly generated apps. This doesn't mean that you upgrade to 1.8 and now you have to change all of your templates to coincide. So that's just a new pattern going forward, which I can really appreciate.
Yep. And we want to make sure to mention that a lot of this stuff is covered in a blog post that you can find on the phoenixframework.org on their blog that talks about this release. Another one of the big changes is the magic links. So when you say, Mix Phoenix new, my project, and then you do a generator to create the auth, you get passwordless authentication now, which is arguably much safer. One is people can't just sit there and brute force try to attack your website with credential stuffing with these are all the credentials we found in this other leak online. It just doesn't work, right? Because it's sending a link to your email. So it's really cool just to see how this works. I think it's a great option. And also included in this is the use of a new plug called require sudo mode, which is that whole idea of you're in your account on the website and then you go to do some sensitive action. Maybe it's changing the billing information, or like GitHub, adding a contributor, things that are sensitive. Then you might have to re-authenticate if you haven't authenticated within some time frame. So that's going to be built into the generators too, which I think is really cool. Just showing people how to do this. Everyone has been having to kind of figure it out on their own. And it's nice to have some people really spend some time thinking about it. What's the best way to do this? How can we do this in Phoenix really well? And then make a generator for it. So that's part of Phoenix 1.8 as well. If nothing else, I would suggest people get the latest Phoenix, generate a new project, and start playing with it. See what it's creating. And then you can compare that and borrow what you want into your existing apps. But very cool stuff.
Also in 1.8, they reorganized the guides a little bit, right? So instead of just this generic guides section on hex docs when you're looking at how to do something in Phoenix, you've got all your typical module documentation, right? But then you've got all these separate guides that they've written. And so instead of all just being guides, they've organized them into kind of domains, right? So you've got a section on how to deal with real time, how to deal with testing and deployment and authentication and authorization, data modeling, things like that. So it's just a little bit quicker to find what you're looking for based on the overall domain. So that's a welcome change. Anything to make things easier to understand the first time that you're going through things is good. Also in 1.8 is scopes. Mm-hmm. Now, this is something I need to have more experience with. And this is generator only kind of stuff too, by the way. It's about patterns. So that's what most of these changes are about, is about patterns. Scopes for data access and authorization, patterns that grow with you. This is what they're saying on the blog post. They remind you that scoping is the most broken part about apps usually, right? When there is a security issue, it's probably because you did something wrong, and it's probably because you just didn't check a permission somewhere, right? It's the most common OWASP vulnerability. And so Phoenix is trying to introduce a pattern to make this a little bit more consistent, so that way you don't have to let it be an afterthought on how you do this in your Phoenix app. So the generators now, the moment you run phx.gen.auth, you gain a new scope data structure. And you know it. If you've ever written any Phoenix app, you always got that current user somewhere, right? Mm-hmm. Scope is basically that, but it isn't just about the user. It's just a regular old struct. It's not a persisted thing. It's just a regular old struct that would contain things like the current user or the current viewed organization. If you have multi, organization access, you can imagine in the UI, right? In the top right corner, you can select, I'm looking at this account. So that's the current scope. And that's what you can stick into the new struct that gets carried around all the time. And so there's new ways of dealing with that in a newly generated Phoenix project. So this is a welcome change, I think. I can't wait to actually try this out. So this isn't necessarily a thing that is web layer only, though. So the idea is that, yes, it does begin in the web layer typically. You get that request that comes in, and then you populate a bunch of scope because you know that from this session or this API key, it's this user, that kind of stuff, right? And it can kind of expound from there. We can talk about macaroons where they have like compounded like scoping of like this request, has access to this resource, that kind of stuff, right? That's what scope is trying to encapsulate here. You take that scope and then you pass that scope down wherever it needs to go. So including like your context file that is about listing posts. So instead of just getting like the user in as an argument, you would get this one scope struct instead, and then you would check that scope struct for all of the things that you want. So that way, 5 years from now, when now every one of these functions now need to consider the organization, you don't add another argument to all of your functions. You just add it to the scope that's already there. You still have to go check your, adjust your queries to go look for that, but it just makes refactoring a little bit easier. That's the idea, right?
What I think is interesting about these scopes is the impact that this could have on the way we design some of the application. Because it was Phoenix that actually created and introduced this idea of contexts, right? That was some years back, where it was just when you would do Phoenix new and you create like a resource or something, it would create a context, which was just a module with a collection of functions about how to access that data, like giving you some listing, find, update, create, delete kind of CRUD actions. And then in there, you could customize it. You can make it do whatever you wanted. It's your code at that point. So this is changing the contexts so that the context that now get generated will have this scope as what gets passed in. I just want to also mention, like, one of the other ideas of what you can do with a scope is, if you've ever seen those websites where you can masquerade as a different user. So I want to, like, only Sally in this other department is seeing this particular problem. Let me masquerade as her and see if I can see what the problem is. But you're still needing to, for security reasons, you still need to know who the actual user is. So there's the actual user who they're masquerading as, but the application does all the UI and everything based on who the masqueraded user or the current user. So things like that can all be batched up into scope.
Yeah, I've done that in a much worse way before, so I can feel that. Yeah, if you don't have scopes, what ends up happening is that you have a bunch of like virtual fields on your user model or something, right? And these virtual fields end up getting populated in whatever authentication layer is happening. And like, you add like impersonated, user as a field now or something. I don't know, whatever, but it's not in the database. I think scopes is a better pattern here. I'm looking forward to it. I can't wait to... I mean, am I going to refactor my whole app to use it? I don't think so, but I know that pattern exists now, and I might like move towards it.
Yeah, but that is really exciting, though. Just the idea of scopes being built in as it's a better pattern, right? So I'm really excited to do that. I haven't played with it yet, but yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in Phoenix 1.8. Then you have Live View 1.1. which had things like co-located hooks and co-located JS, keyed comparisons, and portals. And portals is maybe part of what's talking about with that layouts, the new layouts components. So very cool stuff, exciting times. I'm happy for it. Today's episode is sponsored by phx.gen.auth. Every day, hackers search the internet for vulnerable applications, aiming to steal sensitive data, commit fraud, and spitefully ruin the weekend of a hardworking developer. phx.gen.auth is the first and only security platform with full Elixir support that stops these attacks. Developers love the Elixir native protection, and management loves the phx metrics that detail the security accomplishments of engineering, which are required for SOC 2, ISO, and HIPAA compliance. Sign up for a free trial of phx.gen.auth today and mention Thinking Elixir when you schedule a demo for a special offer. Check it out today at phx.gen.auth. And next up, thinkingelixir.com, the website that I created. Well, the courses are now 100% free and open. So for like 5 years, I've had thinkingelixir.com. I got that set up back when the podcast launched. Originally, it was actually hosting the podcasts through that website. That didn't last very long because it was an underpowered little WordPress website. And when you start getting all of this bot traffic that is pulling podcast information, it just kept knocking the poor little website down because it was intentionally a very weak powered website. I didn't realize what I was getting myself into at that point. So I moved the podcast off of that. So it's at podcast.thinkingelixir.com. What that left me with was this WordPress website, and I had several WordPress plugins that over time became kind of expensive. But they were required for authentication, for membership into courses, purchasing, things like that. And bots were still all trying to take over a WordPress website because, if they can take over sites, they can do stuff with it. And in all of their attempts, it kept knocking the site down. And I got really tired of it. What I ended up doing is I've got 2 courses on there. There's pattern matching, which is a free course about how pattern matching works in Elixir. It talks about the basic data types and includes a lot of hands-on exercises and an Elixir project that you download and use. It's actually using TDD. Here's a bunch of failing tests. We're going to show you how to run tests and write the code. So then there's a second course called Code Flow, which was a paid course. And that applied how to do pattern matching with the control flow of your application, like how to do pipes using the railway pattern, how to use with statements, how to loop, tail recursion, all that kind of great stuff. Included nice things like how polymorphism works on different data structures. So anyway, I made all of that free and no longer has a login either. So what I did is I took the WordPress website and I generated a static website from it so I could shut down the actual server. So it's all static now, all public, no logins, but it's all the content is still there. So I just want to make sure people were aware. If you haven't checked out those courses, or you got a new team member and they're kind of junior and maybe need a little bit more training in Elixir, it's a great resource. It's completely free. You can check it out.
All right, next up, Elixir LS has a new release, version 0.29. And as of today, there's a point release of 0.2. What is new in Elixir LS? Well, you haven't heard a lot from these LSPs in a while. So in Elixir LS 0.29, they added a couple of big things, I think, which is why it's noteworthy. The first one is that it's added a call hierarchy provider. That means that you should now be able to see, there's an LSP function for this. There's a way to see where a function is used and what other functions this function is currently using. That's pretty nice, right? If you wanted to see like, okay, if I change this, what's calling it so I can update them too, right? Mm-hmm. So that's one idea. That's big enough all on its own, I think. But on top of that, they also added a built-in MCP server. Crazy. So I love it though. And so it is disabled by default. So just by upgrading, you don't get all this. You have to go in and adjust the setting. And in case you don't know what an MCP server is, an MCP server is a protocol and an interface between you and a LLM client, such as Claude Code. And it can get better introspection to your code. And so they provide certain tools to that LLM to be able to get accurate information about your code base, right? Kind of like what Tidewave is doing. We've talked about Tidewave before. Elixir LS now has similar capabilities. It's, from what I can tell, less capable than Tidewave, but still fills in a lot of good gaps. And if you're already using the LSP, hey, you don't have to install another thing, right? It's just there. So that's pretty nice. There's some setup instructions on how to opt into that new capability. They come with their own TCP to standard IO bridge, which all LSPs are designed to be your local tool, so there's no remote stuff going on here. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. And then one minor thing, but worth noting, since we're talking about it, Elixir LS now has the ability to configure, to be set to look at a specific location for a .formatter file, right? So a lot of projects, you generate a new project, you'll get a .formatter.exs, and it has just information in there about what to do in certain situations. For example, in Ecto, when you have a schema, that is a macro. Most functions always have that parentheses, but with some macros, like with the schema macro, you don't want parentheses around that. That's what the dot formatter is helping you out with. And so now you can tell Elixir LS where that file is located if it's in a non-standard location, which is generally helpful for some monorepos. So monorepo's got a bunch of Elixir apps and you just want one formatter file, you can put that in the root, even though the mix root is not there, right? So you can now tell Elixir LS to go look here instead, and it should just work, hopefully. Anyway, so that is Elixir LS, and not to rain on Elixir LS's parade here, I'm still very much looking forward to Expert. We've not heard anything about Expert. What is Expert? Expert is the blessed LSP
to rule them all. Yes.
Yeah, to rule them all. That would be the Elixir LS, Lexical, and Next LS all combined, and official. I think official, right? Like that. I don't know if that ships with Elixir or not, but at least official. So still looking forward to that. Very pleased to see that they've. I'm going to guess, but I have no idea, that they've backported some of this to Elixir LS, but maybe not. I don't know. We'll find out when Expert comes out.
Yeah.
So that's Elixir LS, and you're looking for version 0.29 to get the new goodies.
And next up, a new library about searching records with Ecto. It's called Taurus. Taurus. So Taurus is a plug-and-play Elixir library that seamlessly integrates with Postgres's search into Ecto, streamlining the construction of advanced search queries. There are a variety of ways to search a database. You have things like I like queries.
I do too. Thanks for asking.
Yes. Yes. And then the I know, it always cracks me up. Like versus I like. It's like case insensitive, but I like, yes. But yes, you have other fuzzy matching operators too. There's also the similarity operator, which basically does what I like does along with some fuzzy matching, but it can be simpler to use.
Then there's more advanced ones like TS query and TS vector searches, where it kind of looks for like trigrams of a word. So if you break up like a word, like a long word, into what they call trigrams, tri is in 3, there are 3 letters in there, you can kind of get to like the root. For example, children and child. If you type in child, or sorry, the other way around, if you type in children, you probably want a match for child as well, right? So it's not an exact match. And that's where TS query and TS vector can come in handy. And there's various ways to like make that more or less efficient. You probably don't want to dynamically generate all those trigrams, so you'd store that separately, yada, yada, yada. It gets real tedious at this point, but it can really help out with search results. And then maybe a more recent method of matching things is using something called embeddings. This may not be like a typical full text search capability. This could actually be something more complementary to something else, right? For example, how do you search an audio file? You can't. But if you throw that audio file through an embedding model, that generates a transcript, and then throws that through some things like getting the interesting part out of a podcast. You can throw that to a model and then store those embeddings, and then you would search those embeddings. These embeddings are basically binaries of the unique things about that file that's interesting to you, depending on what that embedding does. And so that embedding would use PG Vector, which is a plugin to Postgres, so you'd have to add that, but becoming increasingly common in databases today. So in PG Vector, that gives it the capability of querying those embeddings. And so yes, all of that is included in Taurus. Maybe my favorite part of Taurus is that the documentation on this library is incredibly good. It's so nice. Good. It's teaching you all these different ways of like storing and searching for stuff. So it's teaching you these things. And then on top of that, they have a great demo site. So you can go to the link that we have in the show notes. It's taurus.dimamik.com. That's dimamik.com, and you'll find it there. And it's extraordinary how much is packed into this little library. So yeah, if you ever need to search something, like I don't really know what I need to search, I just know I need to search all of this stuff and I just need these kind of words in there, Taurus is definitely going to simplify that for you.
That's exciting. And next up, there's a new ElixirHub website that was created by the folks at Curiosum. It is called ElixirHub, elixir-hub.com. At this website, you can see all the companies, books, and podcasts about Elixir in one place. At least that's how it's being set up and initially being defined. Unfortunately, when I was checking out the podcasts, they don't indicate if they are still active or linked to any of the episodes or anything like that. They're all just listed in alphabetical order. So you have a number of them that are not active, at least haven't been for several years, or broken links. And then you'll find ours at the end because alphabetically.
Wow. Cool to see all of them though. But yeah, wish we were a little higher up on the list there, huh?
When you check out the website, you can see on the sidebar, it reveals maybe some future plans they have for the website, where they say that some things are coming soon. And one of those is a category like jobs, another blogs, and things like that. So it will be interesting to see what happens with this, how serious they are about really going forward with it, because just that little tidbit of things about podcasts, right? You start to get into all these things about books and jobs, and it can become a lot of work to keep it up to date. We'll see what their intention is here, but I think it's a cool idea. I like the idea of being able to grab a bunch of resources and put them together. You know, for a long time, the way we've had that kind of stuff is people creating awesome lists on GitHub repos. You know, it's just a markdown file with a whole bunch of semi-curated lists of here's all the stuff under different categories of things that might be interesting for this audience. Pretty cool, though.
Curiosum is the company behind this. They're good Elixir folks, though. Yeah, hopefully this is a good commitment for them and it gets adopted. It would be nice to have it all in one kind of spot, right? Mm-hmm. Cool. Hey, there's another library out there called LiveTable. It's a, you guessed it, live view library that provides a, you guessed it, table. It's a good live view enabled table component, makes it interactive. It's got built-in support for sorting and filtering and pagination and all sorts of stuff, right? It's actually been out for a little bit, but it was recently updated to version 0.3.1. That's when we noticed it. Got a link to the library. Big components, big complicated components like a big giant data table that's got all those capabilities. Takes a lot of time to like write that and be good, you know? Mm-hmm. So pretty nice that there's one out there. Another one, totally unrelated, that is kind of tough, a combo box. You know what I'm talking about? Like a select box, but one that you can like type in the value for. Surprisingly difficult.
Type aheads, yeah. Because then it might be able to drop down and give a much richer description of like the records that you could be selecting. So it's not just a line of text.
Yeah. So so to get back to LiveTable. So LiveTable has a lot of those capabilities, right? You can search for what's in there, you can sort and filter and all that kind of stuff. So it includes usage rules.md. What is usage rules? If you haven't heard of it, it is a convention in some Elixir packages coming up, pioneered by a good friend, Zach Daniel of Ash fame, where projects can include usage rules so those LLMs know how to use that package better. And so the idea with usage rules is that all these packages would do something like that. And then you, as the project that brings in all these packages, would run a command that says, all right, give me all my usage rules and then stick them over here. And that way, their LLM agent will have access to all that documentation so they know how to use these projects better. So that's pretty cool. If LiveTable isn't your thing, you check it out, you look at it, and you're like, that's pretty cool and all. I need something a little bit different. There's another library out there that's pretty popular called Flop. And Flop is in two parts. Flop is the database query. I mean, it's a library, but it's like makes things more conventional on how to query things. So that way you're not writing all your custom ecto queries like by hand all the time. Flop will help make that a little bit easier. And then there's Flop Phoenix, which will give you some components, live view compatible components as well. So it's a different way to do LiveTable, I guess. LiveTable seems to be a little bit more in depth when it comes to like interactive stuff. So it definitely seems live view focused, hence the name. And so like, for example, one capability I see is that pagination, you know, if there's many results, you know, it's handled a little bit differently there. So that is LiveTable. You'll find a link to it in the show notes.
And next up, did you know that you can share your Beam-related events on the EEF, the Erlang Ecosystem Foundation's website? So I just wanted to point that out to people to make sure people were aware that this resource existed. We've got a link to it. It's earlef.org/events. That's where you can see like all current events, conferences, meetups, different things like that by category. And you can submit an event. That just means you need to provide some information about the event, and then you can submit your own. So if you want to let people know about your meetup or conference, it's a great resource for that. An official Erlang Ecosystem Foundation resource. Those are some of the ones we want to support too.
Yeah. total aside, but I know we're a podcast, right? So people hear earlf.org. Earl, how do you can't like derive accurately like what is that domain? I'm trying to say. So you have to like spell it out every time, right? ERLEF.
Yes, it's
.org.
Not pronounceable, right?
Yeah.
And Earl doesn't really tell you what it is either. You know, like you don't. A lot of us, we come to the Elixir community, and that's the language we learned. We learned Elixir. So then Earl for Erlang, and so it can be a little bit confusing.
Yeah, not like my name is Earl, but like as in the beginning of Erlang, ERL. I don't know. Maybe there's an opportunity for just something like awesomeelixir.com/ I don't know, whatever. It's just something more memorable. People can just pick it up right at the get go, right? Radio broadcast ads, were very similar when the internet was coming up, right? Typically hear the www.
Yes.
And then they have to say it, and then they have to spell it because anyway.
They're basically teaching you how to use the web.
Right. Yes. All right, last up, ElixirConf US 2025 is just around the corner in Orlando, Florida, August 28th through the 29th. And then there's some training classes right before then. If you haven't heard of it yet, you're a little late at this point. But ElixirConf.com is going to have a lot of information. There is still time. You can still get tickets if you really wanted to. There are, it's just a week away at this point, right? You don't have to be there in person, though. It is a virtual conference as well. So if cost or time is an issue, you can get that virtual ticket, which will get you access to the live streams. And then even if you can't make the live streams, you can see all of it in your own time before those videos start making their way over to YouTube. And so you're going to find that at ElixirConf.com. Again, that's August 28th through the 29th. You can get your tickets a little bit cheaper if you use the Thinking Elixir discount code, and that'll get you about 10% off that ticket price. So yeah, next week, if you're going in person, you've probably already made your plans, right? You don't need to hear this message, but if you haven't made your plans yet, yeah, virtual tickets are good. Flashbacks to COVID days, but virtual tickets were still worthwhile, It's still a good experience. Mm-hmm. Definitely preferable if you go in person, but if you can't do it, virtual is a good option.
Yep. And that discount code does apply to the virtual ticket price as well. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you for listening. We hope you'll join us next time on Thinking Elixir.